Okay, the recording is officially started. We are live. We're good to go. Hopefully, internet holds out. I was a little spotty this morning. We've got the hurricane that's coming in is impacting us a little bit. I'm far enough inland South Carolina that we're not expecting major issues, but we definitely have rain. So we'll dive into this. We'll have some fun, and hopefully, technology holds up, and we can enjoy this. Welcome to Advanced Boolean Strategies. I'm Aquaman. This picture here is from the Aquaman comic. Uh, I'm a big fan. I actually got to meet Chuck Brown. This is my copy of the comic here. I got to meet Chuck Brown, author of Aquaman. Um, and I particularly picked this image because his Black Manta, Aquaman, and Aqualad all work together. This is how our advanced Boolean strategies hopefully are going to work as well. Um, so here we go. Let's do this. I received feedback after last webinar that I don't introduce myself and that people need to know a little bit more about me. So I want to try and connect on a human level. So this is an introduction to Aquaman. And yes, that means me, not Jason Momoa or the comic accurate Aquaman. A little bit about me is I'm a senior talent sourcer at BECU. I joined BECU back in April, and I'm working with Marvin Smith, uh, who is an incredible thought leader in the industry. Debbie Hoskins, who is a phenomenal sourcer and somebody who understands sourcing at a level I've very rarely seen. And Carrie Cochran, who's an employer branding thought leader as well. Together, we're building out a function for BECU to engage passive talent. So that includes the employer branding piece as well as the sourcing piece. It's really exciting work. I'm happy to be where I'm at and what I'm doing. The moniker Aquaman came from being a former justice colleague at Wayne Tech. Back in October of 2021, I joined the Wayne Tech team and was taken under the wing of Batman. Batman being Mike Cohen in the industry, and I was bestowed the moniker of Aquaman. That is entirely because of my blonde hair and blue eyes. Don't let him ever tell you otherwise. But I like it. I started exploring more into the comics, and Aquaman stands for a lot of different values that really rang true for me. And I was like, I think I want to hold on to this superhero alter ego in the talent and sourcing community. I'm a huge Boolean geek. Martel and I have had a couple different conversations. He sent over some strings like, hey, what do you think about this? Uh, Absolutely love doing that. If you have interesting strings, you want to bounce some ideas, feel free to ping me. I love Boolean. To me, it feels like logic problems. I took a logic class, several logic classes when I was attending Southern Utah University and fell in love with it. Felt like it was word math. Felt like I was too late into my career or into my degree to change. Didn't want to do that, but absolutely loved it. I'm an adventurer and wanderer. So I'm going to default to the picture in the bottom right hand side of the screen there. I'm in a green shirt with my Thunderbirds hat from Southern Utah University. I did a Maymester years ago, but I went to China. We met with a whole bunch of university students. That particular picture is at a market in Shanghai where I ate a fried tarantula. That is moments before I ate. 1 out of 1 Chris would do it again. It was pretty fun. It tasted all right. But I'm an adventurer. I like to go explore new places. I've been outside of the country, outside of the United States a few times. I've been to just over half of the states in the United States. And so I like to explore, I like to learn. And I'm a wanderer in the sense that when I go places, I just kind of figure out where to go from there. I get these intrusive thoughts of, I wonder where that goes. And I follow it. So there's that little bit about me. I'm a dad joke extraordinaire. I get quoted regularly, both by my family and by my colleagues, on how many dad jokes I'm allowed to have in meetings or at the dinner table, because I do not hesitate at the opportunity to make a dad joke. I'm a baseball fan and a coach. I'm an avid Angels fan, which is awesome when you have the two best players in the world on your team, which is terrible when you're not going to make the playoffs. So that's unfortunate. But I am a baseball coach. I coach my son, who you can see in the picture on the left. He is 7 years old, and I'm an assistant coach on his team. I've coached his team since he was 3, and we breathe baseball when it's baseball season. The last is I love hot sauce and metal music. I make my own hot sauce, and I attended my favorite band's concert, first one that they've had in years, back in April, and I absolutely love it. So that's a little bit about me. Again, that was feedback I received. I want to be a human connection to you all that have been so kind to lend me some of your time and see me beyond just the content that I try to provide and share with you guys, and the knowledge that I've learned and I want to be able to pass forward. But a little bit about me as a human. So let's dive into today's agenda. I don't want you guys feeling like the team in Jumanji. Yes, this is not the original Jumanji, but they are lost nonetheless. We want to make sure we understand where we're going, how we're going to get there, and understand there's no life-threatening events in our way. So we're going to do just a quick basics recap just to get our brains thinking in terms of Boolean, and then we're going to dive into nesting, stemming, exact phrase, exact term and phrase searching, wildcards, and then learning some syntax. And learning the syntax is going to be the X-ray specific, but I feel like the principles are still very valuable when you start to apply it to a search. So first, basic Boolean recap. Our operators are and, or, and not. They're really self-explanatory and needs to have 2 terms occur, or however many, or is optional. You need one of the terms to occur, and not is that term cannot occur. In your Boolean, you have your phrasing, which is parentheses. Everything within a set of parentheses becomes a single term, and then quotations is how you do exact search and phrase searching. So if I'm looking for somebody who, we're going to dive into this later, but if I'm looking for someone who builds with Python, I could utilize that in a single quotation to create a single term, rather than putting both build and Python as individual terms. We're going to dive into that. Quotations is the most advanced of the basic Boolean operators, in my opinion. But we're going to start with nesting. So we have a few different ideas about how nesting works. With our superhero Russian nesting dolls here, I wish Aquaman was the biggest and not Superman. However, the illustration works. If you've ever played with nesting dolls, and every little one goes into the bigger one, and it goes into the bigger one, and it goes into the bigger one, the same works for Boolean. For every parenthesis that you open, you can continue to build Boolean within that, and you can open more parentheses, and you can open more parentheses, and you can open more parentheses. And as long as you're closing them all, it becomes a single search term. I'm going to illustrate what that looks like here in a moment. But that's the concept, is that you're building multiple possibilities within a single search term or a single closed set of parentheses. The benefit here is that you're building inclusive searching by allowing for those possibilities. The best way to illustrate this is going to be visually explained, but the concept is that if I'm looking for somebody that does a certain thing, or I'm looking for somebody at my organization that has a certain title, other organizations might not have that same title. So if I'm only looking for a title within my organization outside of the market, I'm limiting myself as to what I'm going to find. Nesting is going to help you break down those barriers, be inclusive in your searching, and move forward. So structure right here is our illustration. All terms are contained within that single parentheses, and the illustration here is Java or software and developer or engineer. And you can see Java or software is in one set of parentheses, developer or engineer is in one set of parentheses, and both of those terms are within another set. So that's what the definition of nesting is. And what this does is it allows any of the following options to be a valid search result. Java developer, Java engineer, software developer, or software engineer. So if I'm looking for somebody who specializes in Java, this might be what a title string could look like. Excuse me. But that's essentially the basics of nesting, and the concept of what that looks like. So here's a couple examples that I want to use to illustrate this point. The first one is formatted for a Google X-ray search. The next one you could throw into LinkedIn or play with it however you want. But I'm going to walk through the logic here of what we're doing. The first one, same title or same string that we just saw. Java or software and engineer or developer. However, at the very end, I added and in text Java. What I'm doing in this search is I am uh, telling the search results if the title is Java engineer or Java developer, great. If it's not, and it's software engineer or software developer, I also have to have Java appear somewhere on the page. The in-text Java is also going to pull the title. So what I've done is I've built in a redundancy to make sure that if that title of Java engineer or Java developer does not exist, and I have the alternate, I'm still finding someone that notes Java on their profile, right? So this is the concept of redundancy and a little bit more of an advanced nesting example. The next one also has built-in redundancy. It's nurse and registered or practitioner or resident or nurse. You're not going to have somebody, I shouldn't say you're not, you likely are not going to encounter somebody that titles himself as a nurse, right? But what I've done is in this nested statement is I'm ideally looking for somebody who is a registered nurse, nurse practitioner, resident nurse, whatever that search might be. But if they don't list any of those additional titles and they still have nurse in their title, that search is going to return. If for example, somebody listed that they were just nurse, that's the title. But in the summary of their section of their LinkedIn profile or Indeed resume database, whatever you're looking for, right? If they list that, oh, I was a registered nurse with the ER at yada yada yada, and that's in the summary but not in their title, this string would still pick that up. And that's the beauty of redundancy in your nested statements, is you can be inclusive and you can say, hey, I'm looking for this specific thing, however I understand that things might not be as I perceive them to be always, so I'm going to build in a redundancy of nurse and nurse so that I can still make sure I'm being inclusive. So here's some of your primary nesting tips, right? Build in redundancies, and I beat that to death now at this point. But building in redundancies is super helpful in making inclusive searches, as well as having solid search returns come back. In the example of the Java developer string, if I'm looking for a software engineer, software developer that has experience with Java, I know right out the gate that if Java's in their title, that's probably the primary tool that they work with. So I can quickly pull those profiles and put them into my projects, my spreadsheet, wherever I'm tracking all of this. If they don't have that, and ensuring that Java is still on their profile, that I can then go in and I can start looking, well, what does their experience with Java look like? Do they illustrate that beyond anything other than a giant mess of keywords? And I have to try and just guess, right? But what I'm doing is I'm building in that inclusiveness. Next tip, make sure all of your parentheses have a closing companion. You've likely run into this if you've engaged in sourcing really at all. At all. If you have an open parenthesis, your string breaks. It doesn't return searches. Things get really wonky. You got to make sure that every open parenthesis has a closed parenthesis companion. And then the last tip I would have is start small and build your muscle memory. If you use tools like Seekout, for example, nesting can get pretty wild and you can have a lot of fun with it. But if you haven't built up that muscle memory of nesting and doing so effectively and cleanly, you're likely going to run into issues. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll try to do my best to monitor that. I'll get to the chat afterwards in its totality. But if you have any questions, comments, feel free to put them in there. Next, we're going to move on to stemming. Stemming is one of my favorite tools, and I found a new love for stemming. And this is my visual explanation of how stemming works. If I'm looking for somebody that has experience with managing somebody, right? Managing a team, managing a project, whatever that might look like. And I put in my search, I need someone with experience managing X. Well, now I'm only looking for managing. And so if they put on their resume everything in past tense and it says managed, I'm missing them. They're gone from the search, and I'm not inclusively searching now. I need to be willing to understand that people write present, past, and future tense, or I guess future tense. I need to learn my English a little better, I guess. But managing, right? Manages and managed, all of which are real terms you're going to see on resumes. And this isn't the only example. This is just the one I'm choosing to utilize for this. So if I put in my search term manag, right? I intentionally leave the e off. Um, what I'm allowing for is multiple results. Because if I put manage and I just leave manage on its own, I'm never going to get managing. Uh, but if I drop off the E, stop at the G, I now get all of these results: manages, managing, managed, manager, managers, management, and managerial. Right? All of those are stemmed from the word manage. But the search engines are looking for what comes after the last letter in the term that you put in. So again, if you include the E, you're going to miss out on managing, and anyone that speaks in that tense on their resume or on their LinkedIn profile is gone from your search. You're not going to pick them up. Um, so that's stemming in a nutshell. Let's talk about why stemming is important. If stemming is not checked, it can alter your search results dramatically. The greatest example that this has ever been for me is the use of Java. If you've ever had to look for somebody that uses Java and you just put in Java as the search term, you've probably got results of people that utilize JavaScript, which is a totally different technology. The long running joke is that recruiters message software engineers and they're looking for somebody that codes in Java but is proficient in JavaScript, and they say, "Oh, isn't it the same thing?" Because it's not. So be cognizant of what stems are going to come off of whatever root word you leave. This is a highly powerful capability of search engines, and we're going to talk about how to utilize that in the sense that point number two there, it can also be used as a shortcut for wildcard searching. Where I'm gonna illustrate what that looks like. I've made some fun memes. I hope we get some laughs. But that's the importance of stemming is that it's useful, it has a place, but you also have to be very aware of what it is doing. And the biggest benefit of it all is it inherently builds inclusive searches when used appropriately because you're allowing for variations of tense inside of a resume or LinkedIn profile. So here's the exact terms visual guide. Again, I put this together to illustrate how exact term searching works. All you do is you take whatever stemmed word you wanted or whatever term you're looking for, and you put quotations around it. It's a really straightforward Boolean principle, but understanding visually what that's doing, I think, is highly important. If I put the same root word of manag for manage in my search term, but I put quotations around it, all it will ever return is manag. So if any word has subsequent letters to actually create a word, it's never going to generate. It's looking for manag in its lonesome, not as part of the word. So why is this important? For exact phrase searching, it's the reverse of stemming, right? Using your quotations will prevent stemming and allow for phrase searching. So the example here, again, is Java and software engineer will result in both Java and JavaScript. And I walked over that. This is the opposite. And I can see I've already made a mistake. I'm missing a quotation in Java. It happens to the best of us, I promise. But Java in quotations, ideally with a closed quotation, just like parentheses, and software engineer would result in just Java, but not JavaScript, because it's not going to allow for the subsequent letters to come afterwards. So the use case here is that you can combine with stemming root words for useful phrase searching. You'll also hear people refer to this as natural language searching, right? If I'm looking for a software engineer that has experience building network infrastructure, a lot of softwares will interact with different aspects of the network infrastructure and never build it. right? But if I'm putting it into an around statement and I'm putting build, ideally I'm being inclusive, right? So I just put BUIL done around network infrastructure. I'm then allowing for built, build, and building occurring around network infrastructure. The strategy being that I'm using both stemming and a structured phrase to create a natural language search. How are these people actually talking about what they do? I don't want to know if you have network infrastructure experience. I want to know if you have building network infrastructure experience, right? The phrase searching piece of quotations is that everything within a single quotation becomes a single term. Think like parentheses, but you're allowed to put multiple words together. The caution here is try not to use this around verbs because then you're not allowing for that stemming inclusiveness. You're going to use it around nouns, right? Network infrastructure. You're going to use it around banking technology. You're going to use it around software as a service, right? All of these things you're going to put into quotations so you get the exact phrase, but you don't want to put in verbs. So next one down, maybe I'm looking for an account executive that has a lot of sales experience, particularly at that top level. With the stakeholders, executives, executive team leaders, executive leadership team. Right. Again, present being my verb, I'm allowing for it to stem. So now I get present, presenting, presents, presented, occurring around stakeholders or executives or executive leadership teams. So your exact phrase searching becomes a very useful tool when you're using it in proximity, when pairing it up with stemming functionality. This has become one of my favorite ways to build out X-ray searches, and I've dove into this quite a bit over the last couple months because I realize that it's very powerful and yields a lot better results than what I was doing before, which was wildcard searching. Dan, great question. The bar is an or statement. So we'll go back real quick. So where you see stakeholders, bar, executives, bar, ELTs, that's an or statement. I use that in this instance simply for compactness, so that I didn't have a string that was running forever long. But it is an or statement. If you need help finding that key, it took me way longer than I would ever care to admit, but it's just above your enter key on the right-hand side of your keyboard. And is blank, correct. And is blank, or it's a plus symbol if you're using the plus symbol. But Google in particular, if you just leave blanks, it's going to treat everything as an and. Great question. Wildcard searching. I used to think wildcard searching was amazing, and then I realized there were better ways to do this. Wildcards still have very much a function, and I think it helps primarily in writing clean Boolean, which we'll talk about in a minute. But wildcard searching is very platform dependent. I put a post up a couple months ago talking about how to utilize it and realized I had been making a mistake. And this is kind of where the root for this webinar happened. I had been utilizing the asterisk as an auto completion in LinkedIn Recruiter. And I was getting the search results that I wanted, but what I didn't realize is I was writing my Boolean in a way that I was allowing for stemming appropriately. And it was actually stemming doing the work. However, wildcard searching is still a very applicable Boolean strategy to think about, as it has a different focus. In my opinion, it really helps keep things looking really clean so that if you're going back reviewing Boolean and trying to figure out what to tweak, they're really easily identifiable options. However, platform dependencies or wildcard is very platform dependent, but you can think outside of the box of how it's going to work. So for X-ray, if you use the asterisk, it fills in the blank between words, right? So manage engineers. I am looking now for manage and engineers in that specific context. And based on my experience, X-ray likes them near each other, but I don't know what near means. Sometimes It's pretty consistently 3 or 4 words in between. And then I've also seen it pretty consistently between 10 to 15 words. So the extra wildcard's not my favorite anyway, but I feel like it's important to at least address that it's there. Seek out, on the other hand, it's an auto completion for a word. So, for example, if I put MANAG asterisk, it'll now autocomplete every variation of manage. It allows for that variation. However, so does the simple stemming, right? And so hopefully you're picking up on where I'm about to go with this. But Dan, great question there. Does the asterisk work on LinkedIn? It does not. I thought it did, and I had incorrectly posted that it did. And the evidence of that was that it was still stemming from my roots, and it was working, but the asterisk itself was not serving any purpose. Generally, when you have the asterisk and you're utilizing it as a search function, you will pair it directly with the word, no space in between. So hopefully that helps. So here's my custom memes, guys. I made these for this presentation. You're not going to find these anywhere else. This is literally the thought process that I had, right? I'm a sucker for humor. Pam in the office over here saying that they're the same function, that the wildcard functions and stemming root words does the same thing, right? There's not a difference between them. Likewise, I like wildcard functions. This is brilliant, right? But stemming root words in an around function, I think, is a lot more effective in helping me at least understand how the Boolean is working. Search results are going to be about the same. It's really just a way that you're formatting it and what you're choosing to do. But the concept is that you're being intentional about it all. Yes, Martel. When used in search queries, the around with a specified number of terms in between. But using stemming and exact phrasing, as we saw earlier in the presentation, in an around function is so effective. It is so good. And I've really grown to like it a lot. That being said, when I started writing Boolean, when I had simple searches and there was a lot of stemming that was happening and a lot of mixed results, I was told that my Boolean was sloppy. The Boolean, though, is not sloppy if it's intentional, right? And thank you for Reddit, oddly satisfying, for this picture. The organization of your Boolean and the cleanliness of your Boolean is going to be what ultimately determines how effective your searches are. So if you're being intentionally or you're intentionally using roots for stemming, you're going to get good results for that. However, if you're careless with the words that you're using, stemming is naturally going to occur and it's not going to result in the searches that you want, right? So write clean Boolean is the biggest thing that I can say. Where we as sourcers or recruiters that do sourcing, we are like the software engineers of talent acquisition. And this is our code. This is how we find the people. This is how we open Pandora's box and we really get to find everything that we're looking for. You've got to be clean, just like software engineers look for clean code. It's not a scam. I'm not trying to sell you any idea that isn't real. You will get better results. The way that I recommend doing that is using a text editor. You can download whatever text editor you want. I particularly am a big fan of brackets.io because it's free. I don't like to pay money for tools. So brackets.io is an example of that. The reason I recommend using a text editor is a lot of them will help you see open parentheses or missed quotation marks. And so it helps you write clean Boolean. You can also break it up line by line or term by term of what you're looking for to get a cleaner draft of your Boolean before you throw it into your search engine or you throw it into your sourcing software. Again, I almost want to get this tattooed. It's not sloppy if it's intentional, guys. Using stemming for better search results is super helpful if you're doing it intentionally. So then let's talk about syntax. Again, mostly applicable to X-ray searching. However, there are some nuances here that are going to help you figure out what you're looking at if you're still sourcing using LinkedIn Recruiter, or you're sourcing using Seekout or HireEasy or whatever other tools you're using. But syntax in itself is super important. The way to break this down is that every website is different. Every website has their own nuances. Think about which ones you use regularly and what you see generating regularly. When I was working at Wayne Technologies with Batman, there was a brief stint, probably about a year and a half ago, a little over a year ago, where we were looking at even Seekout and how Seekout was breaking down searches in the URL bar. As I would put in my search and I would see what would return. If I went up to the URL bar, I could see how it was coded. And so we started writing X-ray searches for Seekout. You obviously have to have a Seekout account for this to work, but we started using the URL to specify very specifically some of the things that we wanted, and get around some of the limits of power filters and search parameters that Seekout then had. So it is applicable outside of just X-raying to find individuals. You can use it with your softwares and understanding how your softwares are breaking down the way that it searches, right? But LinkedIn.com/in always yields profiles. If you're ever sourcing from LinkedIn, you don't have a LinkedIn recruiter seat, so you're going about it on Google, or if you just don't want to use LinkedIn Recruiter, which is the boat I'm in. Generally, I prefer X-ray if I'm taking that approach. LinkedIn.com/in. Always profiles. Other sites have /user /profile in the URLs. Think like Reddit, Red Hat, for example, will have user or users. Reddit has /u/ for user. So think about what websites you source from regularly, what the syntax is there, and then build that into your Boolean string for your site commands or your in URL commands. If the URL differentiations aren't there, think what is consistent on a profile. Again, for an example here, if I'm sourcing software engineers off of GitHub, looking for contributions or followers or following are going to be terms that appear regularly on a GitHub profile. If I'm sourcing off of social media, looking at followers or connections or friends, these are all going to be anchors that you can utilize in your Boolean search functions. And then last, ask questions. LinkedIn is a network. We're all here, I'm assuming. We're all on LinkedIn, and that's how you found out about my webinar. We're here. Ask questions. If you're trying to use a new tool, you're trying to find or create a new search, and you're struggling with it, ask. We're a community of professionals who are all working at finding top talent. There are people out there that are willing to help. But that's my little bit on learning syntax as a Boolean strategy, thinking particularly about what what consistencies are there that you should utilize. Dan, yes, I do have a cheat sheet for some of the other sites such as GitHub, Stack Overflow, and so on. I'd be happy to connect with you and share that. I'm putting together a resource from my experience that I have run into, as well as the cheat sheet that I've already had and has been made available to me. But I want to put together a resource that I'll make available to everybody. I don't really have a timeline on that right now, but it is in the works. So I'd be happy to share. Okay, that was a lot in 37 minutes. Covered a lot of advanced Boolean strategies. I want to open the floor for questions. Again, my chat is over on this monitor down here. So I'm going to be looking at that monitor. We will get into some live practice in a minute if people don't have questions, but we've had several questions. So I'm going to dive into that best I can right now. And we can do some live practice and see what this looks like in the real world. Let's see. Oh, we got a joke in here. Okay. Uh, I was in the bank and an old lady asked me to help her. Oh, it's not wanting to work. How do I expand my chat? Help her check her balance, so I pushed her. Oh, that's great. I've heard that one before. My wife worked at a credit union before I did, and not the same credit union, but um, I keep working on this joke about paper, but it's terrible. That's a good one. Slight caveat to that one, Preston, is I've got a joke on construction. I don't know if you're ready for it because I'm still working on it. Renee, unclear what around will bring back and what the three means. Great, Chris. It looks like you answered that a little bit within or three around three words of each other. I'm assuming I'm saying your name correct, Renee. If it's Rennie, I apologize. Um, Either way, the around function works on X-ray searching. Seekout has a slightly different structure to it, but the around search in Google X-ray is that you put whatever term you want first, and then you put around in all caps, and then you put a number for within how many words or instances you want term A and term B to occur, and then you'll put whatever term B is, right? The way that I use this the most often when I'm X-raying, aside from utilizing this in stemming and natural language searching, is locations. So this is a great way to practice that. Is if you're at Google X-ray searching LinkedIn and you put site linkedin.com/in, just start throwing locations in there. People list what locations they've got or where they've worked, but anchor it to connections, right? So if I were to put, for example, if I were to put Dallas, right? I put Dallas around 5 or around 10 connections. There's enough terms up at the top of a LinkedIn profile that can sometimes get in the way. But if I'm anchoring that word Dallas to connections within those, that limited number of spaces, it's going to return profiles because I use linkedin.com/in of people that have marked themselves as living in the Dallas area. But that's how the around function works. I would be happy to send you some more resources on that. Just connect with me afterwards. Dan, we talked about the asterisk in LinkedIn. You can use a question mark as a quick caveat to that. You can use a question mark at the end of a word in LinkedIn, but just leaving it there does the same thing because the question mark allows for a single letter to be added on. So as long as you don't have it in parentheses, it's going to do that anyway. So it's really a useless function. Good job, LinkedIn. Let's see, Dan, yes, I touched on the cheat sheet. I'd be more than happy to connect with you, share what I've got. Yes, Chris, I too love the sourcing community. There are so many people willing to help. An example I love to use that about a year ago, almost to the day, I was sourcing for an account executive based in Germany. And I wanted to do my due diligence by the client I was working with. A little bit, and I was like, hey, I'm having a hard time figuring out how to source on this. It functioned similar to LinkedIn, but was still very different. And so I made a post. I asked for some help, and that was one of my most viewed and interacted with posts from last year, which was pretty wild to me because it was a post asking for help. But my analytics, the number of impressions it made, comments, messages that I got from it, was seriously one of my best in all of 2022. Dan, great question. Why do you need to have a round on that example with Dallas? I'll show you. We're going to go live. That looks like that's the last question. So let's do this. We're going to go live. So if I go site linkedin.com/in and I look in Dallas, and that's all I put, right? I'm looking for Dallas. I'm not anchoring it to anything. I'm going to get people named Dallas, and this is last name Dallas, um, right? City of Dallas. Cool. I know that they're there, but I'm not going to have everybody in Dallas. Dallas Godfrey, located in Cleveland, Ohio. However, if I do it in an around function, let me zoom in. I'm terrible about this, and I apologize. We're going to zoom in. Is that better? Can you guys see? It's not as tiny, hopefully. So if instead I put that into an around function, Dallas around, I do 5, and then I do connections. What I'm going to get is still the same problem because that's a common first name. Let's change location just to illustrate the point. We're going to put what's something that is not a common name? Let's do Salt Lake City, Utah, because it's a phrase. So Salt Lake City, around 5 connections. So everywhere here, these people should be located in Salt Lake City, whether that's Salt Lake City metropolitan area or Salt Lake City itself. Let me turn my seek out extension off. Oh. It's just wanting to be extra helpful. That's fine. So we're going to go ahead and open some of these. Hopefully this illustrates why I would use the around function for that. Here we go. So Brooklyn is a student located in Salt Lake City, Utah, right? Bart is an owner, Salt Lake City, Utah. And I don't have any other search terms here, so it's just going to pull anybody that is living in Salt Lake City, Utah. Salt Lake City, Utah. However, if I were to not put it in an around function, and I just put Salt Lake City, what I'm also going to run into are individuals. Let's see how far down we have to go before we get there. Salt Lake City metropolitan area, Salt Lake City, Salt Lake City. Let's add to the search. So let's pretend this is a real search. So now we'll put in our Java or software and engineer or developer and Java. Again, we're building redundancy in our nest. So now I'm looking for Java software engineer. Well, I can see he's in Chicago, not Salt Lake City, but Salt Lake City appears somewhere on Justin's profile. So if I open it up, next one, Nikita is in Salt Lake. Caleb looks like is currently in Salt Lake. Ian is also currently in Salt Lake. However, the top search result was not. And that's going to illustrate the idea is that we're being precise. Justin is a software engineer in Chicago. Where is Salt Lake on his profile? I'm vested on this one. I have no idea why he would be returning. All right. Either way, that illustrated the point I was trying to make, right? Justin obviously is not in Chicago. Looks like right here, Java software engineer, software mastering, had Salt Lake City located there. My guess is this is from the Seek Out Chrome extension. Awesome. I'm not signed into Seek Out on this browser, so that's not going to work. But Seek Out has him living in Salt Lake. Somewhere in his data, Google sees that he was living in Salt Lake at some point. So he's returning in this search result. Dan, Google is not showing the number of results because it's being a stinker and I'm in my other browser. Let me fix that. We're going to go into settings, all search settings, other settings. Continuous results should not be there. That's all right. We'll figure that out in a little bit. So let's just go software and engineer or developer. We'll drop the Java piece. All right, so you're going to see Salt Lake is still going to appear in the search results. Again, the idea is building precision. Why is Google not showing? I don't want it to do continuous scrolling. I'll have to play around this and figure out why it's not working. Yeah. Anyway, back to the around function. Using your location in the around function is to build precision. Anybody that has Salt Lake City mentioned anywhere in their profile is going to return in this search. However, if I anchor Salt Lake City to the connections, I've refined the search to those that have noted specifically that they're living in Salt Lake City because it's up at the top of the profile. Dan, they must have updated something. I'll have to play around with it, figure out what's going on. But we got about 10 minutes of time before this ends. Are there any other questions about advanced Boolean? Is there anything else that we want to try and practice? Somebody wants to see live? I'm more than happy to help out. Actually, let's come back over to here. And we will pull this phrase here. I want to illustrate how this works. Yeah, Martel, we can take an example role. Let's do it. You got one? Right. So if I'm looking at LinkedIn.com and then I've got building an around function, right? Build around network infrastructure. So now as I start to look at these, I can see, Casey was on the network infrastructure build team. I can also see that Mark was building network infrastructure. Right? We can scroll down, build network infrastructure. You're going to see building, build. If I were to drop the D and let it stem more, might see built. We're not going to dive into profiles too quickly, but this is how stemming versus with an exact phrase is generating more inclusive results. You can see very clearly with Mark, we've got building network infrastructure, and then just below Chris Campbell is build network infrastructure. Building that or creating that inclusiveness in your search results. All right, Martel, we've got Beaker reporting analyst. Beaker reporting analyst. All right, I don't even know what that is. So let's figure this out. Extra letter there at the end. Beaker reporting analyst. Primary support contact for data models. Dan, I'll answer that question in just a minute. Let's try this. Let's see what we can do. Beaker reporting analyst. What returns? Cogito. Okay, so I think I'm starting to understand a little bit of what you were throwing in there, Martel. Slicer dicer, Cogito, clarity. Yes, Ashley, great one. One tab Chrome extension. I also will use a web scraper and pull LinkedIn URLs and put them into an Excel spreadsheet. Just depends on what I'm doing for the project. Okay. Beaker. So let's change this. Martel, we're going to play around here. We're going to go in title. Report and analyst. And then we're going to throw in Beaker or let's see if I can get that list from you real quick. Slicer dicer or clarity or caboodle. Is that how you would say that? Caboodle EJ or caboodle J. Let's start here. Caboodle, is there no J at the end? There we go. Dan, I use Instant Data Scraper. It's right here. It looks like a little Pokeball. Also a free Chrome extension. So, shout out to free. So let's get some of our practicing in here. Just to illustrate what we were talking about, I'm allowing report to stem by not putting it in any level of quotations. However, I want analyst to be very specific. I don't want analysts in there in the event that somebody says that they are manager of reporting analysts. Terrible example, not likely to happen. We're just trying to illustrate here. But allowing report to stem is now going to allow for report and reporting. Beaker, slice dicer, clarity, or caboodle with no J. Okay, with no J. So we've got that going on. If we were to add this to, I would run with that first initially, where I've not done this search, and I would start looking. Martel, is their location? United States, nationwide? Are we looking particular location? Is slicer dicer showing up in the title or in the body? Right now, I'm not specifying where it needs to be, just somewhere present. So it could be in the title. It could also be in the body. Business intelligence analyst, Epic Clarity report writer, Epic Clarity report. Report analyst, Monroe Clinic. So let's jump into this one. Let's see what Jody's got on her profile that is returning, because we've got report analyst here. As a report analyst, let's see. We had clarity in there. Medical record supervisor. Oh, there it is. Clarity data model, Epic anesthesia. So clarity is appearing in the profile. Title is report analyst. And so it's meeting all the criteria of our search. If I needed to be specific about how clarity is using, I would try and pair it up into a natural language search, which we could dive into, but we're just about out of time. 100% remote. I'm assuming, Martel, that's 100% remote in the United States. Okay. In that case, just for precision, because this is what we do, I would put United States around 5 and connections. Wonderful. And then you can start throwing in things you don't want in the title, natural language searching around those specific terms that you've thrown in there, Martel, such as slicer, dicer, clarity, caboodle, using those in natural language searches. I would love to collaborate with you on this. I know you are heading out of town, but let's touch base and see if we can do something there. Dan, send me a message on LinkedIn, and I can get you some resources on a cheat sheet that I use for X-ray syntax while I am still waiting for and putting together my my own version of what that would look like, what I feel would be most helpful. But everybody, that is today's webinar. We're right at the hour mark. I do have to bounce because I've got a work meeting, but hopefully this has been beneficial, that you've learned. We'll go back to the slideshow because I have my favorite slide is I have to go. My fish need me. I am Aquaman. That moniker I don't think is going to disappear, but I'm always happy to share, always happy to collaborate. So feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or send me an email if you want. Email is less reliable in getting a hold of me. LinkedIn is far more reliable, but thank you everybody for coming. This recording will be sent out if you're all here, you've registered, but it will be sent out as soon as it's finished processing. I will also make it available on my LinkedIn page if you need to come back and visit some of the principles we talked about. Again, I appreciate you all for being here, and I hope you all have a great day.